The circuit judge there, Chris Piazza, ruled Tuesday as he dismissed a lawsuit that accused Arkansas legislators of using the 47-year-old program as a money laundering machine to fund pet projects. Now, the individual who brought this lawsuit, his name is Mike Wilson. He's a Jacksonville attorney. He spent 12 terms as a Democrat state representative, and he joins us now via phone. Mike, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
So tell us a little bit about what motivated you to pass or to bring this lawsuit. I know you had brought one in the past and you were successful, correct?
Yes. The current case that Judge Piazza decided yesterday is an outgrowth of the case that I brought 5 or 6 years ago and went to the Supreme Court that prohibited local legislation, that is, acts of the legislature that benefited only one particular place or entity. When that decision of the Supreme Court occurred several years ago, the members began to devise a different and a newer scheme or artifice, I'll call it, to accomplish the same result by using the local planning and development districts as a purifier, so to speak, of the funds, such that it might not be considered local or special any further. That's what prompted the new method prompted me to begin this current lawsuit, which will now go back to the Supreme Court after Judge Piazza's decision yesterday.
So you're taking this. You're gonna continue to take this all the way up. I think that's a good thing. I'm glad you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
Let me ask you this: do you have? Obviously, you think what's going on here is illegal, but aside from it just being a letter of the law thing, do you have do you personally just believe that this shouldn't be the way taxpayer money gets doled out just by the
Well,
the
of course, it sets up and perpetuates a system whereby some taxpayers are more equal than others. By that I mean members of the legislature can and do, under the present scheme, pick and choose who gets the benefit of taxpayer money, rather than having a set of standards to go by. And that's the objectionable thing to me at the heart of it, and that's why our Constitution, our state law, prohibits acts of that nature.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of learning. A lot of us, on my program here, we've been talking a lot about the state constitution and how, it really is set up to limit, what the government can do in many regards, and we see that trying to be lifted in a lot of different areas now.
That's right. It gives us and our representatives rules to go by, and those rules are strict and intended to be followed directly and specifically, without methods or schemes to avoid them. And that's what I maintain this current system is, and the old system was too.
Yeah,
this court
absolutely. So
knocked that out unanimously. We'll see what this current court does.
Again, folks, we're talking with Mr. Mike Wilson. He's an attorney from Jacksonville. He's, in my opinion, doing a really good thing here, calling this, bringing attention to it, filing this lawsuit. What's interesting is the state Supreme Court has already ruled in his favor, and they basically said, hey, you can't allow lawmakers to use these state funds to pay for their own pet projects in their districts. And so then to get around that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, to get around that, they said, okay, well, we'll allocate the money not to state legislators. We'll send it to these regional economic development centers, and then the economic development centers will then move the money to where the legislator tells them it needs to go, and there's some ambiguity there, because they're going to say, no, we're not directing it, but in reality, there's emails, right, where it's pretty clear that. So tell us about the emails.
In the case that I'm currently involved in, I asked for and received from our local planning and development district correspondence, mainly by emails, from various members of the legislature directing how the money was to be spent on the local projects, and that is plain, it's clear, it's conclusive, and it's not even disputed in this lawsuit. So, it even though the planning and development districts are inserted in the middle of this process, they follow the directions of the legislators who appropriate the money, and it's divided up among the members of the legislature at so much per head. In the local case, $70,000 per House member, $285,000 per Senate member, and that's just one set of appropriations that are current.
So by getting rid,
2015.
So by using the planning centers, they basically have found a way. If Mr. Piazza's ruling is confirmed by the Supreme Court, and I hope it's not, they will have found a way to get around the initial Supreme Court ruling, preventing.
Correct.
And I hope that doesn't happen, because I think the Supreme Court originally, when they ruled the way they did in the first time, I mean, I think they knew what they were trying, what was going to happen.
Yeah, the Supreme Court in the earlier case expressly and pointedly and unanimously followed the Constitution, and that's this current effort is simply a method to try to avoid the force of the Supreme Court's rulings 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, I certainly hope and wish you well, and I hope that this continues to, I want to prevent it. Here's my whole thing is I just would rather they appropriate money. If they need to put money in this area, I mean, why can't they go through a different process as the part? And it's all about the credit, right? I mean, you were a state representative.
Sure. When there is a statewide need for a particular program, the legislature can react and provide the funding for it under conditions and standards and processes that apply to everybody equally, so that everyone, all the taxpayers, have an equal shot at improvements in their own neighborhoods. Everybody wants a ball field or a Meals on Wheels program or a college building in their local areas. It's quite unfair and quite prohibited, expressly prohibited by the Constitution, for one area to receive, or one legislative district to receive those statewide taxpayer benefits, and the adjoining neighborhood does not.
Yeah.
And that's the.
Do you think? Because I've kind of called this a slush fund before.
That's what it is.
Okay, I'm glad you agree. But I also have got. I've heard from candidates who run for office, and maybe they're challenging incumbents. And let's say they go to a fire department in a rural district, and the people of the fire department, they really like this candidate who's challenging the incumbent, but they say, "Oh, you're running against him. He just gave us this money from general improvement, and so we're going to have to vote for him." I mean, in a way, it's taking taxpayer dollars and trying to retain votes.
There's no question that that's what has occurred here. In fact, in my current case, there are express pledges of political support by the recipients of the money, and that is a threat to
I completely agree. There's no doubt about that. Well, Mr. Mike Wilson, we do appreciate you coming on the program, and feel free to keep us updated on this, and we're going to certainly continue following it for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.